Welcome back to the Black Table. My name is Greg Carr, your host, and today we are going to have a conversation about the global pandemic and its impact and effect on education in general, and historically Black colleges and universities in particular, and also the impact on non-white students in the United States and beyond. And we're going to have it with three major master teachers at historically Black colleges and universities. And this will be an ongoing conversation with these scholars, these teachers, and our comrades at historically Black universities as part of our regular HBCU Educators Roundtable. So the global pandemic has really disrupted all of our institutions in one way or another. And education, which is the foundational institution upon which human society is built in so many ways, has not escaped. Many, like NYU Business School professor Scott Galloway, has said that COVID has simply accelerated trends in higher education. It hasn't just disrupted, it has accelerated, not only in higher education, but in K-12 education as well. So we thought that for our initial HBCU Master Teacher Roundtable, Educator Roundtable, we would invite three of the best in the business. So today we'll be having this conversation on COVID and its impact with Dr. Catherine Adams, who's an associate professor in the Department of African and African American Studies at Claflin University in Columbia, South Carolina. Dr. Mario Beatty, who is an associate professor in the Department of Afro-American Studies at Howard University, and Dr. Valethia Watkins, who is also an associate professor in the Department of Afro-American Studies at Howard University and director of Howard University's Graduate Women's Studies Certificate Program. So welcome, colleagues. Welcome to the Black Table.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see everybody.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Colleagues.
So
it's good to be seen.
Good to be seen and not viewed.
That's right.
Which is a little bit of gallows humor, unfortunately, but we know that we've all been in this profession for quite some time. Between the four of us, we've got well over a century of experience at just about every level of education. So I want to start with this, and we're just gonna have a bit of a conversation today. Anybody have any striking stories as it relates to COVID regarding yourself, your colleagues, and maybe how you or your students have been impacted the most?
I think for me, in terms of what I've seen in students, I have noticed a tremendous amount of more mental health issues being expressed by students to me, orally and in writing. I think that for students, perhaps not being on campus, not seeing their friends, being more isolated at home, all of us, I think the isolation, the kind of the breakdown of the bonds of community has impacted all of us, but I have seen that impact in my classes. So I constantly am getting students that are depressed, that are asking for longer extensions to complete assignments because they are just tired, fatigued. They're dealing with a range of family issues like all of us, meaning that many of their family members have caught COVID. I've had a student where multiple members of their family members caught COVID around the same time. We're in the hospital. Like all of those issues, the emotionality of all of that and the stress that comes from that is tremendously impacting student outcomes. Mm-hmm. And we don't discuss that very much. I mean, it's like when you come into the classroom, it's like, okay, all things considered, here's the work, you do the work, you get your grade. But we have to be sensitive as professors to this whole range of external issues and circumstances that is beyond any of our control that is impacting dynamics in the classroom. And there's no way that we can escape it, and we have to face it. But more so for me, it's changed me fundamentally too. Because in this environment as a professor, you have to be more flexible. I think it calls for that. You have to be more empathetic. You have to be more understanding. You have to be more supportive. And when I say flexible, that means that for me in the classroom, that deadlines or hard deadlines are not as important for me as they were before COVID. And I tell students to reach out to me if they are having problems. And to be honest, and they don't have to go into specifics, but just tell me you're having a problem. And 10 times out of 10, I am going to work with that student. Because that's the type of flexibility that we need in order to get us all through this moment. And I think that the focus should be on intellectual growth and development, and not so much punishment, for not meeting these strict deadlines because, COVID is raging outside. I mean, we can't pretend that this is impacting academic instruction in our institutions negatively. We just can't pretend that. And so I'm not going to. So I learned that lesson very quickly. And I think that served me well because students feel that. They feel the love and support that I have for them in this environment. And so I think off the top of my head, I would say the mental health challenges, the range of them have been the most telling aspect that I've seen from students in this environment.
And I would add that, to put that in context, with Dr. Beatty, we've been his colleagues for many, many years. And he is a person that holds students to the highest standard of performance. And prior to COVID, was very much about teaching them to meet deadlines and to meet the particularities of an assignment. And so that adjustment really is an important adjustment. And I have had feedback from students that not all professors have made that adjustment. There are many professors that take these kind of issues like mental health and the other things that are related to this pandemic. They try to treat the classroom environment online the same as they did prior to COVID. And so for some of our colleagues, when students are presenting these kinds of challenges, they treat it as them just engaging in the usual finesse of not meeting their obligations. And I've been amazed at the number of students who have tuned into class, but have told me they are working. And so sometimes they're dipping out of their job as a waitress or other kinds of jobs and taking classes in their cars or in a private closet somewhere where they're trying to balance meeting economic obligation, whether it's because family members have taken ill and they have had to step up their economic contributions to their family. And I think certain people in economic positions in this society are so less sensitive to the majority of the people who are struggling or who struggled prior to the 1 or 2 times that people were given COVID relief from the government. People who are comfortable or who are in jobs where they don't have to go out and meet the public, unlike many people of color who were bus drivers or working at the grocery store or those kind of public-facing jobs, have not been as sensitive to the economic plight, the struggle that our students are facing, their families are facing, and many of them have been called upon to contribute to their families. So, but in addition to that, stepping down a step below the mental health issues, I really think people underestimate how much human to human interaction, how important that is. And the community bonds on a HBCU are really a major part of the experience because these campuses have always been under-resourced from the national government and state government. We've always had to make a way out of no way. And one of the intangibles has been the bonds, the networking, the family, the sense of family that was built, that compensated in some ways for those lack of physical resources and other resources that our institutions often find themselves deprived of. And so those interactions are so critically important to a part of the education experience. And I think we've gained a greater appreciation of how important those bonds are, that sense of family.
Let's look at that, Lethea. And in fact, we're going to pause for a moment. And when we resume, Kathy, I hope you will lead us in a conversation and maybe share some of your experiences because of us, I think you have been the one who has been the most required to be on campus during this pandemic. So we're going to take a pause, and when we come back, we're going to continue this conversation on in-person versus remote learning, students at HBCUs and our institutions, and we'll talk more about that and several related issues. Back in a moment.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat at the Black Table with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Faraji Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
Welcome back to the Black Table on the Black Star Network. I'm Greg Carr here with our HBCU Master Teachers Roundtable, Mario Beatty, Lethea Watkins, and Catherine Adams, and we're talking about the impact of COVID in the current landscape of higher ed in general, HBCUs in particular, and K-12. When we left, Mario and Lethea had laid out many of the challenges facing our students and how it has adjusted our work as teachers and educators, particularly at Black colleges. Kathy, you have taught both above and below the Mason-Dixon line. You've taught outside the continental United States, University of the West Indies. Like the rest of us, we worked at public and private schools, historically white schools and historically Black schools. But your experience at Claflin, I think, distinguishes ours at Howard and so many of our colleagues, particularly at HBCUs. You've been in person for a great deal of this time back and forth. Could you help us kind of tease out some of the things that Mario and Lethea opened up with in terms of this, faces the challenges facing our students, and also the challenges facing us as teachers, and perhaps even some of the tensions that we have, because administrators don't always get the memo. They have other priorities. But let us know, because you've been literally in the classroom.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to co-sign on everything that that Mario and Valethia were stating, and certainly to talk about, even just today, we saw emails requesting or telling students about the increase in accommodations that they have to apply for those every semester, that those don't carry over from one semester to the next. And so those issues, the increase in accommodations, students certainly trying to get in education however they can, from their cars, from those closets, those small offices on their work site. And I think for me, I just wanted to also mention that this was the first time that I got a chance to see COVID on the screen. We had a kind of hybrid system. Initially, we were required to be in the classroom, and there were small numbers of students that were allowed back to campus at Claflin, particularly because Orangeburg is such a small city that it is easily overrun with COVID cases, and the infrastructure can't support the two major HBCUs that are in Orangeburg. And so I had some students that were on campus that were kind of sent home very quickly. And if they tested positive, without regard to what might be the best way to integrate them back into their homes and communities, that's been a concern. I've seen COVID on the screen for students who are still trying to not get lost in classes. And so they may have contracted COVID, and they'll come on with their cameras off. And then after class is over, those students will turn their cameras on so that I can see them. And it's been very disheartening to see young people experiencing those symptoms, and maybe just a little bit of fear behind their eyes in terms of what that means. I think even for the students who are not asking for accommodations, not expressing any mental health issues, and maybe on the campus, as many were this past fall semester, very sometimes subtle changes and sometimes not subtle changes in focus and concentration, just the ability to get through a book from end to end, I think has been difficult for me as a professor. And so it allows me to be really sensitive to how I can model for my students ways in which to share the load of work and to work through some of those focus challenges. And I just wanted to say something. I'm glad, Greg, that you mentioned about those tensions, because there are two things that are of great concern to me. One is the way in which the campus, the HBCU on-campus experience is being curated during COVID. So there is this, like, we're going to have homecoming, we're going to have these activities. And in some ways, students wanting to connect are showing up to those events, but maybe we're not really focusing in on some of the intellectual capacities and ways in which we can be using that sense of community to help bolster what students can do to not only kind of survive through this moment, but also to build new capacities. And so is kind of curating a campus experience that it has very little mention of the intellectual work and how we can be flexible around those things. And then some of it is just kind of gotcha politics, like I refer to it as gotcha politics because it's like we make students prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that there's an issue that we need to provide an accommodation for. And then there are some students that are falling through the cracks in that, so that the student who doesn't have COVID, but may have had a parent or a grandparent pass from COVID. The student who may just be fearful of being in a classroom where we talk about spacing 3 feet, and that's the CDC guideline. But mentally, I've been in some of those classrooms where they say, well, we spaced the chairs out 3 feet apart. But when the bodies are in the seats, I can tell that I leave the classroom with just a slight headache. And I think in the background, my brain is looking at all of those bodies in the chairs. And sometimes they just look like this is not 3 feet.
Yes.
And so if I'm thinking that, I know the students are thinking that. And there are very few accommodations for the student that says, I want to be on campus. I want to be in a dormitory. I need that Wi-Fi, because a lot of students from Claflin are from rural communities. And it doesn't matter if you send them a hotspot, they may not have very good cell phone coverage. So a hotspot's not going to help them. Campus will help them. But being in the classroom, being forced into the classroom when we have technologies like they could access Zoom from their classroom and still have access to the resources, that we haven't quite caught up with a response that is allowing students to feel comfortable in asking for the myriad of things that they need, knowing that there'll be an affirmative response.
That's interesting, Kat. I mean, and a little bit later on, we're going to talk about what we think our students and what the data is showing us students may or may not be losing in terms of their academic progress, their intellectual growth. And as you talk about it, Valethi, it reminds me, I mean, you've taught in the community colleges of Chicago, and we see that that our faculty colleagues K-12 in Chicago have said they're not going back in the classrooms until these kind of safety measures are introduced. And the mayor of Chicago has said they're engaging in a legal work stoppage action. But that having been said, how do we approach these very real questions of lack of technology, lack of access, and how do we connect that with, as a recent study, Fayetteville University polled students, and almost all of them, 90%, said they were worried or extremely worried about how COVID was impacting the institution. They're very worried. 60% of them said it may take 2-3 years for HBCUs to return to normal. But it sounds like even returning to what we were doing before COVID doesn't address the fact of what some of the things Kathy just raised in terms of the challenges, the very real challenges that existed pre-COVID in terms of this kind of bureaucratic process, not listening to educators, perhaps diminishing or lowering the attention on intellectual development. How do we address these issues that have been laid bare by COVID, like this question of the intellectual development of students, the concerns of students, not just the emotional anxiety, but the even process of teaching and learning, things that we all knew existed before COVID, but COVID has now just exposed it, and there's no place for it to hide.
Yeah, balancing these different or competing interests is what we're being confronted with. And a lot of these issues have been moving forward, like you say, accelerating what was already taking place. And what I mean by that, early on, I must admit, I wasn't, even though I served on a technology committee that evaluated applications by faculty members to turn their classes into hybrid courses, or even to encourage them to create online courses. In the back of my mind, I was always concerned with the for-profit motive or intent that these were trends. I mean, I embrace the technology because I think there are benefits to it, but we have to balance them with human interest. And for some people who are bean counters, who devalue what professors do, what we do in the classroom, what we bring, the intangibles, those people who develop assessment in ways that want to treat it just like working on a factory assembly line, and you could just count widgets, these intangible things that happen in education that you can't always count and measure in individual increments. My concern was always that this was a trend like you see in grocery stores, that as you've seen the acceleration of ending jobs of even cashiers, that so many grocery stores, whether it's Whole Foods or the local pharmacy, now you're seeing these self-checkout. And that's technology replacing human interaction, human jobs. And so, frankly, I was concerned very early on that the use of technology was designed in a way to harness our expertise, what we bring, to try to videotape it, to try to curate it in ways that then they could just always put in a tape, push play, and eliminate you from the equation. That they were thinking about bringing in just low paid workers as really TAs and others to just grade papers, and to use the technology to just replicate what they thought they were going to be replicating, the professor's expertise, just by using tapes of the professor and being able to eliminate the professor from the equation. But I think one benefit of this experience, whether it's people through K through 12 or even at our level, the people are gaining an appreciation of the importance of teachers and what we bring, and how we can impact and touch lives and change lives. We've all had our lives changed by a teacher. I remember my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Shelton, who invested so much in me, who gave me such a strong foundation. Many of us can reach in our lives and talk about a teacher that has changed our life. So in that regard, what's happening in Chicago, for example, I saw a debate from a parent who wanted the kids in the classroom versus a parent who said we needed a pause. Is this conversation about education is not the center, although people talk about what they're doing in terms of education at the center. The reality is they're saying these parents cannot get back to work unless these kids are in the classroom. And so it becomes about keeping corporation and economics going, as opposed to, are the children safe? We see an increase in young people having COVID. I'm talking about the K through 12 young people having COVID. I mean, why can't a model be created to, like the wealthy are doing, to have small pods? Their education of their children have not been disrupted by the pandemic.
That's right. Well,
it's the education of other people.
In fact, that's a good place for us to take another pause. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of these disparities in academic growth, and from here on in, for the rest of the show, have an exchange and a conversation about how these disparities exist and what we've been doing to try to address some of these things. So again, you're with our HBCU Educators Roundtable. This is the Black Table. I'm Greg Carr. Back in a minute.
I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Welcome back to the Black Table. We're continuing our Educators Roundtable talking about COVID and education. And we're joined again with Mario Beatty from Howard University, Valethia Watkins from Howard University, and Catherine Adams from Claflin. Valethia, you were talking about the impact that we see K-12, when you mentioned Chicago. Kat, you taught K-12 in Philadelphia, in your hometown. I mean, and we all have very good friends and we've done administrative work and taught at the K-12 level. Man, our colleagues are suffering. I mean, the students aren't just the only ones. Anybody have any thoughts about that?
Absolutely. I mean, just to pick up on, what Valethia was saying and, what's going on in Chicago, there are the issues of these economic considerations that are being pit against health and safety considerations. And kind of early on in the COVID crisis, the health and safety considerations were weighing out. It was clear that we need to pause. We need to go virtual for health and safety reasons. As vaccines have kicked in, and the impact of those, and then just time itself, there is a increasing sentiment. Both by conservatives and liberals, that it's just time to get back to work. And as a professor, in this moment, I'm kind of in alignment with the Chicago teachers because I'm thinking, okay, for the past 2 years, we've all been sold this dream that the vaccines were going to help us to get control of this virus and help to get back to some semblance of normality. And I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting, and so we're in the midst of, the raging Omicron variant. And you're like, hold on. Like, okay, we've had 2 vaccines and everybody getting boosters and this stuff is off the chain.
Man,
and no one has a good answer for this. And so you tell me as a teacher, you're going to, risk your health and safety. And in an environment, especially at the university level, there are things in terms of health and safety protocols that are set on paper that actually don't match the reality of what's actually being done.
That's true, brother.
In the schools.
That's true.
And teachers and professors see that, they note those contradictions.
That's right.
And, they want at Howard, everywhere, we're constantly noting those contradictions.
That's right.
And so professors and teachers are giving pause because they're not listening to words. They are looking at the reality that they experience in those classrooms and what is actually done.
That's right.
And so, those teachers are taking a stance and trying to say, look, we need to be absolutely clear that the health and safety of teachers is a priority. in this. And if you're not going to make it a priority, we're going to make sure that it's a priority.
But those teachers are not individual persons. What people don't realize, those teachers are parents. They're usually taking care of children, their own children, and their parents or elders or other sick members of their family. And so for them, the risk is not just as an individual, I may get COVID, but it's also if I get COVID and I'm the only person providing economics to this family, or I'm taking care of my elderly mother or husband or my sick child, then that's a whole network of family members that are in trouble. So I guess I would ask Dr. Carr or Kathy, what do you think about the conversation that early on people were saying, we're not going back. See, I don't think society has accepted, we're not going back to what it was. And that's what was so great to go back to.
Right.
Is this normal that we need to create new systems to deal with a new normal? Or what we going back to? What we rushing to get back to that was so great?
Mm-hmm.
I want to respond to that in some ways that are where we really are thinking about what's best for our communities. And I had an opportunity over the summer to work with some young 7-year-olds. And this was through the Every Black Girl program put together by Vivian Anderson here in Columbia, South Carolina. And Vivian decided that she would open up her space. She usually works with high school girls. And because of COVID, there were lots of parents saying, I've got to go back to work. Can you, can I bring my children to you? And so she got some computers and opened her space up to children of all ages, and decided from seeing what was going on that she would start to pull together some small groups of children. And Monique Bing is the young woman that she charged with putting together this program. And I took material that Carr, that you have put out there around the Black curriculum. Very helpful. Monique was like, can you come and teach Africana studies to 7-year-olds? And I had a ball. It was a pod, right? And it was this way in which it was a moment to look at what were some of the deficiencies for those young people, and bringing in people every day of the week because their parents are working Monday through Friday. And so Monday through Thursday, it was bringing in someone that was going to help with skills, not just intellectual skills. These young women, these young girls were taught yoga. They were taught how to manage their emotions. I taught them Africana studies, and someone was working on their reading skills because they saw that there was a little bit of a lag with that. And then the rest of us reinforced it. And then on Fridays, they took them on field trips. And what was done in 5 weeks with those girls was amazing. So much to the point that I told my students in the fall, everybody is responsible for teaching someone. Maybe in a formal setting, maybe in an informal setting, but your cousins, your younger sisters, brothers, someone in your community should know some of the things that we taught you this semester. So I'm really excited in many ways to get back this January to find out what my students did over the break in terms of just conveying some of this information to young people in their own lives. Because I think that in the same way that, I think Valethia was right. And how can we support places in our community that can provide some spaces that would alleviate some of that pressure for teachers, that would alleviate some of that pressure for parents? And how will we fund those projects? How can we pour in to those kinds of spaces with all the things that we've ever done in teaching Black studies in our communities over time. There are enough curricula out there for us to replicate that in very small groups, so that our college students better understand what we're teaching them, because they are teaching it to someone younger than themselves. So I think that there are some ways that you're right. We're not going back to the ways in which they thought, but I think we can be creative and take the best of what we've done in the past to craft a very different and better future that is something that is still intellectually rigorous and also safe, because a lot of those spaces, especially in K through 12, were not safe for our kids, with some people who did not have our kids in mind.
That's true. Well, when we come back, we were going to turn to that. Actually, that's perfect, Kat. I mean, we've got two of our colleagues in Atlanta, Morehouse School of Medicine, Reba Kelsey and Maggie Ridge. And as we know, Maggie is a pediatric doctor. They're talking about this rush of children with COVID coming into the hospitals, and we know Black children have accounted for 20% of those who've lost a parent to COVID through early 2021, despite only being 14% of the population in the country. But you've just given us a window into possibilities, learning possibilities that we can have going forward. And when you said community, Kat, when you said community, I mean, it's going to require us to recover some things we may have conveniently forgotten and maybe sacrificed on the altar of capitalism. But we're back in a second, and we will turn toward those solutions.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
It's time to be smart.
Roland Martin's doing this every day.
Oh, no punches!
Thank you, Roland Martin, for always giving voice
to the issues.
Look for Roland Martin in the whirlwind, to quote Marcus Garvey again.
The video looks phenomenal, so I'm really excited to see it on my big screen.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
I got to defer to the brilliance of Dr. Carr and to the brilliance of the Black Star Network.
I am rolling with Roland all the way.
Honored to be on a show that you own. A black man owns the show.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now. Roland was amazing on that.
I love y'all.
I can't commend you enough about this platform that you've created for us to be able to share who we are, what we're doing in the world, and the impact that we're having.
Let's be smart. Bring your eyeballs home.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared. You dig?
Back at the Black Table with our HBCU Educators Roundtable, Lethea Watkins, Mario Beatty, and Catherine Adams. And when we paused for a second, Dr. Adams was introducing to us one of the innovations that has come during COVID there in South Carolina based on her years as a master teacher and educator, curriculum developer. Okay, y'all, we've all participated in writing curriculum. Some things we've done together. We've taken students abroad. We've done any number of things. In knowing you all and listening to how you've approached these challenges over the last couple of years, what are some of the, for lack of a better term, positives in terms of things we can maybe recover, retool, remember, and apply? You just gave us one incredible example there with what you all are doing with these young people, and particularly the young girls. Anybody else want to let us know some of the things that you've learned and perhaps we should be able to share, and then maybe even address or confront administrations in higher education in general, HBCUs in particular, and K-12 included, to say, look, find the money for this, move in this direction. What do y'all think? Some of the things you learned, positive things?
Well, I think for me, well, I will say, going back to a point Kathy made earlier in the conversation, in terms of accommodations with students. And this goes to the spirit of a professor. And that means, of course, when you hear accommodations, that means the students go through usually some entity like student services on campus. They submit their issues, and then student services communicates with the professors, and the professors then use that documentation to provide students with some type of extension, timeline, kind of special accommodations to complete work. Well, the common sense of the professor needs to kick in and to override. Like, that means that students that don't have formal documentation for accommodations in this environment, I've been flexible with virtually any student that has said that, look, this is what's going on in my life. They may not feel that it's as serious enough to go through student services to get accommodations, but my common sense is like, okay, yes, and I'm going to support you. And to me, that's the power of the professor. That's the power of the professor to override the system. And I think that professors have to use their power and their common sense in their way, looking at this dynamic, and to act accordingly in this system. So you don't have to always be subservient to the system as it impacts your course. In terms of what, I've kind of learned in my class, teaching virtually, the big thing that was missing was community. And I like to try to create community in my classes. It's Black Studies. And it's grounded in that idea. And so how I try to do that is the first 2 days of class, I use the breakout room feature in Zoom, and I just randomly put students together and just have them introduce themselves and talk. And that's the balance of those classes, is just trying to build community among students in a very isolating environment. And I think that becomes very, very helpful for the remainder of the course, because they begin to help each other, they know who each other are, and they can exchange information in terms of work. The other thing, I've done a lot of things, but the other thing that I've done is I use a discussion post in Blackboard, and I have students to respond to readings, to lectures, to videos, etc. Give 5 important points to have them to write something. But most importantly, I also have them to ask at least one question about what they read or viewed. And I curate those questions, and I use those questions to formulate my lecture and discussion. And I'm literally responding to those individual students. I'm letting them know that I see you, that I hear you, that I observe that you're reading and engaging in the course. And as a professor, I'm going to answer your question directly and show its importance in the large arc of the content that I am teaching in the class. So what I'm trying to do with that is to form just another bridge of intimacy with the student, to get them to buy into the experience and to connect with me and to connect with the material. So almost they're just self-motivated to go through the material. He's like, okay, this professor is listening and talking to me. When students hear that and feel that from a professor, you can take students anywhere that you want them to go.
Absolutely.
Anywhere.
Absolutely.
That has to be foundational to me. You have to connect with the spirit of your students.
Yes.
That's what I try to do. And once I connect to them, then we can take off.
That's interesting you say that, Mark, because I mean, that balances out. There's some research that's showing that COVID rates are lower at some of the HBCUs like North Carolina A&T, some of the Georgia HBCUs, because the COVID rules have been more strictly enforced at some of the HBCUs than PWIs. But rather than that kind of martial, kind of militaristic approach, that type of connecting, even virtually, that's a very powerful counterbalance to that, and kind of gets us back to this question of what we can do to enhance. There are a couple of other things, and I want everybody to jump in on this as well. There are real material challenges. Y'all have all raised them. Our students are looking for funding. We know the federal government, the funding, the HBCUs, you see a lot of loan forgiveness going on, but still the gap remains.
We're part of it. I'm part of it. I am one of them.
Be right. It's like, exactly. They
are me.
I know that's right. But this. What does the future pretend? The immediate future, like the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and then going forward in terms of students' abilities to even enter higher ed, particularly our HBCUs. Are you concerned about the future of some of our HBCUs in the wake of COVID? The learning gap, the gap in learning, seems like y'all are addressing it individually, but what can we do at the institutional level in terms of formations to try to kind of address some of these challenges that aren't on the horizon that are here right now?
Right. I'm definitely concerned because my student loan debt came when I was a doctoral student. I virtually had no debt as an undergraduate student. So these students are incurring lots of debt at the undergraduate level that's following them. And somehow in this kind of capitalistic environment, we blame the students. Oh, these students, you took out all of these loans, you got to repay society. But we should not think of it like that. That means that we have shifted from my era and the era before me. We have basically shifted the economic burden of education from the state to the student.
And these are public policy
Absolutely.
decisions.
These are public policy decisions that have happened that
or choices
should be reversed.
Choices.
Absolutely.
I think in this regards, when we look at African Americans, in some respects, student loan debt, the disproportionate amount of student loan debt, we can look at it as modern day sharecropping. Rather than using education and these opportunities to lift our communities up into home ownership and into economic situations that we can pass on to another generation, this debt creates a ceiling that keeps you at a material level that it's just like our families who were on the farm, sharecropping on the plantation. So, this is a real choice because the generations before us did not have this amount of debt. There was an investment in public education. There was an investment, and of course, HBCUs didn't experience that level of investment, but you're investing in the future. And so students should not have this amount of debt, and that's a public policy choice. So if you want to talk about reparations, provide quality education, and investing in quality education is one of the major forms of reparation that we could have in this country.
Yeah, and getting rid of that debt shouldn't be linked in this kind of neoliberal kind of fashion to looking at what students study, or want to study. This kind of Obama-esque, kind of approach that HBCUs and HBCU presidents railed against, when he was in office. And certainly I didn't support one bit. And this idea, that certain disciplines are worth more than others. And this idea that the market, should drive, graduation rates. And those are the things that we should be investing in. And we should be investing in the dreams of our students, because all of these disciplines are needed for a holistic, healthy, functioning society. And so we should not be playing these types of games where we value, some disciplines more than others in an economic sense. Those types of games are, and really that's what assessment has boiled down to. It is basically a not so thinly veiled cover for basically institutions making economic decisions on market decisions based upon their assessment of disciplines.
I agree. Not only should we just wipe away this debt, because it's absurd, we can just wipe it off the books. They don't owe anybody. It's not like that someone loaned them the money out of their pocket and they're waiting for the repayment of the loan. It's all digital. It's all arbitrary, and I think of my students, like that opportunity in the classroom. We're planting seeds, and so I know that all the students on my campus need exposure to Africana studies, regardless of their major. They all need to be thinking creatively, thinking differently. They need to be building their networks so that as some student that may be a STEM graduate or a business graduate or education, that they are thinking about my majors in Africana studies when they are putting together teams of people to work on things. I had a very recent Claflin graduate. She graduated with a degree in biology. She was working in a lab at the University of Pennsylvania, and she reached out to me for a letter of recommendation. And she said, I have all the things that I need from the STEM faculty, but your class in African American heritage really helped me think differently around diversity issues. And so I would like a letter of recommendation from you to complete my packet. And so we have information that is going to be valuable for having a cohort, a generation of young people think differently. And I think that we not only have to have them in our classrooms, we have to think about how do we get this content to students broadly who are not in our classrooms. One of the things that I have suggested for our department at Claflin is, and it has been well received, to start doing more professional development with public school teachers, because some of them have some really great ideas, but may need that kind of added support of a certificate program or just some additional books to read or some of the latest scholarship around how to enhance their curriculum around what they're doing. And I think it's an exchange. Some of the things that I've learned from first and second grade teachers around what they're doing with young people. I'm thinking about some of the ways in which, just again with those seventh graders, we do a timeline in the African American heritage class that students have to figure out an actual timeline in which they insert themselves. I did the same thing with the seven-year-olds, where they did a timeline with Post-it notes and, just some blue painter's tape on the wall. And that was the timeline where they got to insert themselves, and then also events that were related to Africana history. And so I think that we really do have an opportunity to be imaginative, to be creative, and maybe to do what we've always done, which is to do it on fewer resources than other things. But I think at the same time, we should be demanding a redistribution of resources, because we see through this pandemic that there is money there.
Yes,
absolutely.
Lots of money there, but we have to demand for the redistribution of those funds.
Well, thank you, Kathy. And I think that's a wonderful way for us to pause for now. Here at the Black Table, this has been a bit of a tease, I must confess. This topic is timely, it's important, as our young people and all of our teachers in our communities are struggling around this issue of education and the pandemic. But I say it's a tease because this is just the opening conversation of many more to come, not only with Drs. Beatty, Adams, and Watkins, but with many more of our colleagues, because we often are reminded by one of our colleagues, Jules Harrell at Howard University, that a university and education in general is really the students and the teachers, and everybody else is there to support that learning enterprise. And so you've gotten a peek at the HBCU teachers, the HBCU Master Teachers Roundtable that will be a regular feature here at the Black Table. So thank you, Dr. Watkins. Thank you, Dr. Beatty. Thank you, Dr. Adams, for helping us with this inaugural conversation. And we'll join up again soon to continue on another topic.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Faraji Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
I'll clear the table this way. We usually end our time together with a clearing the table comment. We know that recently we marked the transition in the ancestorhood of the great Sidney Poitier, that son of the Caribbean who we know best as a film actor in Hollywood. One of the films he made was a film called To Sir with Love. To Sir with Love, the story of a teacher, a Black teacher in England, teaching East End students, poor working class white students, who fell in love not only with his mind, but with his commitment to their learning. A lot of people might not know that film, To Sir with Love, was based on a novel. Actually, a novel by a brother who was an HBCU master teacher himself, Eustace Edward Ricardo Braithwaite, E.R. Braithwaite, who was from Guyana, who lived to the age of 104, actually made transition in 2016. And Professor Braithwaite, after watching To Sir with Love, said, something didn't quite translate in the film. He was from Guyana. He had a master's degree from Cambridge, couldn't get a job in England. So he took up teaching, even though he had been trained in engineering, one of those STEM fields. He could not find his way into the profession initially. He was part of that generation that folks call the Windrush generation. Those of you watching from the UK know what I'm talking about. Those Black immigrants who came from the Caribbean and rebuilt England after World War II, who had precarious positions, who found themselves in a precarious position in that society in England. But I raise that because Sidney Poitier, who portrayed that teacher in To Sir with Love, is widely credited in that film with showing, how to build interracial bridges. But there was another film where Sidney Poitier played a reluctant teacher, he and Bill Cosby. That was a film called A Piece of the Action, where they were in Chicago teaching young people in a community center on the realities of life and how to acquire that education and use it to improve their lives. And as we close this edition, as we clear the table, the Black table, and prepare for our next time together, we've been reminded by three of the best teachers there are in the world that community, that compassion, that commitment to deep intellectual work can never and must never be displaced as the foundation for education. So thanks, y'all, for joining us. And we will see you again on the Black Star Network with the Black Table next session.